Thank you for everybody coming to our meeting today, the climate mobilization. We're really excited today about having Zero Waste Montgomery speak to us today about what we can do to get to that place of zero waste. But we're going to start off with, there we go, just some meeting protocols, which is to please stay muted unless you are speaking. And we are recording this meeting to make it accessible. Well, make sure what everybody said today, of course, and then also then to make it accessible for people who couldn't attend today. If you could, it'd be great for everybody to introduce yourselves, put your name, where you're calling in from, and your email address in the chat. And then we will be taking your questions. If you can put your questions in the chat, we'll definitely get to you. And then, or you can raise your hands at the end of the presentation, and we'll call on you to ask your questions. So of course, Q&A is always an important part of these meetings. So I will now pass it over to you, Carl. I'll stop sharing.
Okay, great, Kevin. Thank you. So thank you for joining tonight's discussion about this being presented by Zero Waste Montgomery. We went to focus on a number of issues that they are important of, one of being the issue of the incinerator and whether it's going to be closed for various reasons. We're advocating for that. And so I wanted to turn this over to Mike Ewald and Lauren Greenberger from Zero Waste Montgomery, and they are going to be making a presentation on what they're up to and what the strategy is for Montgomery County.
Okay, thanks, Carl and Kevin. Appreciate it. I'm Lauren Greenberger, and I'm part of Zero Waste Montgomery County, local citizens advocacy group, and our primary focus is working on getting a better waste management system for the county that does the least harm. And for us, that's not incinerating, and it's landfilling what we can't repurpose, recycle, and reuse. So let's go to the next slide here. Carl and Kevin asked us to tell you right up front why we're here, and this is how you can help us. You can include this incinerator issue in your messaging to your membership and county council members. We have a very extensive frequently asked questions document that really helps answer some of those thorny issues about, well, what do we do if we don't incinerate, et cetera? And is it really dangerous? And what about the diesel fuel emissions and all of that? Also, you can invite us to speak to other groups that you're connected with. So if you are part of another group that you'd like to have a presentation, we'd be happy to do that. And we'd love for you to join our effort to close the incinerator. You can fill out the volunteer survey that's listed here, join our meetings, and participate as you like with us. And we are currently setting up meetings with county council members to talk about, kind of inform them about what's happening in the county right now and what we would like them to do. We'd love to have you participate with us in that. We have already, we did a presentation with the Climate Coalition earlier, and we've done one with Sierra Club. Climate Coalition has made this now one of their priorities, and Sierra Club has asked us to do an article for their newsletter just recently. So I guess the other point I'll make is that we will do a lot of this work for you. We just need your support. I mean, this is our mission. This is what we work on. We spend a lot of time on reading documents that come out of the county and talking to the Department of Environmental Protection, but we need to have a broad support in the county to be effective. So having your support would be great. And we will have a sign-on letter of support coming out soon. So next slide. So here's the issue. Here's why we're here today, really. Every day that incinerator stays open, human health is endangered. Despite the fact that they will tell you we are operating below the limits that EPA has put out, we still are emitting toxic emissions and greenhouse gases that are polluting our environment. It's the #1 static source of greenhouse gas emissions in the county. And it also produces very toxic emissions for which there are no safe limits. This opened in 1995. It's aging. Its costs for maintaining it and keeping it just safe, I'm not saying make it better or more cleaner, but just safe, are going to go up over the next few years. This is the last incinerator built in America, and many have been fought and won against that have tried to open, as you all know, Frederick County tried to open one a few years ago. So we're the last one built, but we're still aging. We're almost 30 years old. The county has committed to closing the incinerator eventually. So Mark Eldridge has been saying this since he started running for office. But the contract completely expires, no extension, in April of 2026. They told us they'd have it closed by then, but they are now writing a new 5-year contract with the incinerator operator, Reworld, which used to be called Covanta, but now has a pretty new name. This is very, very disturbing to us. And the reason it's so disturbing is that they have now decided to link the incinerator closure with reducing waste first. So rather than do this concurrently, close the incinerator, send the residuals to a safe landfill, they want to build out all these zero waste systems, which is laudable, but they will take years to get up and running and to bring waste volumes down. So our ask and our message is untether the incinerator closure from plans for a new waste processing infrastructure. Closure and zero waste strategies must not be linked. Both strategies can operate concurrently, and that's the big thing. We want this done together and now, not wait until all those strategies are in place before they close. If he insists on this, we could be burning for another 10 years. 5 years, it could go on for more. And if Mark Eldridge goes out of office and then we have somebody else, it could be worse. So we are sending those pollutants in the air, and we are dumping a toxic ash on a majority Black community outside of Richmond, Virginia. Next slide. So you all know this, I'll just state it quickly. The incineration endangers our health and the climate. I just said it's costly. Continued use of it prevents food waste composting at the Dickerson site, and incineration hinders waste reduction. They need to keep burning to keep that thing effective, and it does not encourage anyone to do waste reduction strategies to have that burning. And dumping that ash in Virginia is basically environmental racism. We are taking Montgomery County's very, very hazardous ash, and they call it, they say they're using it for landfill cover, but it's a toxic material. So the solution: close the incinerator and landfill our residuals. That reduces health and climate impacts. Landfills are bad, but they are not as bad as incineration. You have many, many fewer emissions, both from climate emissions and health related. 600,000 tons of material is burned every year, and that to almost 200, 150,000 tons of ash is sent to this landfill every year. If we stop burning, we have almost no health impacts and far fewer climate impacts, because all the landfills we looked at different environmental justice criteria of landfills and found those that are capturing methane gas and have environmental conditions around them that would not harm the number of people who are being harmed by the incinerator and would produce less emissions than our incinerator is. It also would allow for the immediate expansion of the compost facility for food scraps, and that can ramp up as fast as the county can build it. They've already got a budget for it. They've got the money allocated. And we could start countywide composting collection. We're currently the county's doing 3 pilots right now that have been successful. So that could be ramped up. And also, if we do this, then we showcase the incinerator closure and launch the full county zero waste plan. A win-win sort of for everyone. Can we hold questions or, yeah. Okay, so this is the incinerator. Just wanted to show you what it looks like. This is where all the trash in Montgomery County is burned. As I said, almost 600,000 tons a year. It depends on the year, but next slide. So this just is a chart with way too many numbers on it, but basically it gives you an overview of all the things that are coming out of that incinerator and how much is coming out of that incinerator and their rank as an industrial air polluter in Montgomery County. And as you can see, this incinerator is mostly the number 1 and number 2 polluter of all these chemicals in the county. And you can, if you just glance over on the right side, what these things do to your body, what they do to the health of our community. And of course, we know what the greenhouse gases are doing for our environment. And that's just unacceptable, because we can do better. We can do less harm by closing this thing. Next slide. So we presented this information. We've talked a lot to the county executive, and he actually asked, this is how our group became a group. He came to us and said, would you write a report that demonstrates what incineration is doing, use EPA data, tell us how much emissions are coming out, and do an analysis of all of the potential strategies that we could follow that would be better for our community and safer. So this is the cover page of the Beyond Incineration report that we worked on. We hired several consultants to work with us. We had an expert in life cycle analysis who took all the Montgomery County data and created a overview of what the impact of this incinerator and what the impact of other strategies would be. So let's go to the next slide, and I'm going to turn it over to Mike to just give you a brief overview. This is a page that gives you the results of that 120-page study that we did.
Okay, thank you, Lauren. So this is also a lot in one place, so that's why we color-coded it to make it a little bit easier to digest. But you'll see in the first 2 columns, these are the scenarios for continuing to incinerate, whether it's through the end of the current contract in April 1st, 2026, or through 2040, as some of the consultants were advising the county to do. These are consultants hired by the Northeast Maryland Waste Disposal Authority, which actually is at the center of the contracts and makes money off of it continuing. So we looked at those, and by a lot of different factors, economic, environmental, climate, health, all those things, we looked at them and we kind of color coded them to simplify the results of what you're seeing in the text to show which ones are better or worse. And the two that involved incineration came out worse on almost everything except for the capital costs of building a new landfill. Also in Dickerson, this is a site sitting on top of a sole source aquifer, so a very bad place to be putting a new landfill. And Dickerson is where all sorts of unwanted industries that Montgomery County has tend to get concentrated. So that is that middle column there. So you see that's kind of in the middle, and some things is better, some things is worse. But what we found is that the last two columns, whether we're landfilling by out of county and transporting it by rail as we currently do, or by truck, both of those options came out to be the least bad of the options for what to do with the waste that's left over. Of course, we all want to go upstream and reduce waste. There's no disagreement on that. The only issue is, when are we going to close the incinerator and move on from it and recognize that landfilling is the lesser evil compared to incineration and dumping ash in landfills. Now, when we did the life cycle analysis on this, this is something that I've worked with the PhD economist who developed the model for this. It's called MEBCalc. It's the Monetizing Environmental Benefits Calculator. And I was taught and licensed to have this software to use. And so it was the first time I was running it myself. And with his guidance, put the numbers together from the emissions for the incinerator compared to about 10, or exactly 10 landfills in the region. These were among the 10 better options of 42 landfills that we evaluated. And these are on Pennsylvania, Virginia, and Ohio. So what you see in the second bar here is the composite of those 10 landfills versus the county's trash incinerator. What we're looking at is that it's 3.2 times worse for health and environmental damage to burn this county's trash in the incinerator and then ship by rail the ash to a landfill in Virginia versus going direct to any of the landfills that we were looking at. And the reason these are able to be stacked up is all these impacts are monetized. So there's the social cost of carbon when it comes to greenhouse gases, and you can say 1 ton of carbon equals this much economic damage. And economists can do that, and they use the latest numbers for this model to put all of these on one slide so it's an easier thing to absorb. So what we're looking at is in dollars, and this is per ton of trash disposed. So on top of the 70 roughly dollars per ton that you currently pay to burn your trash at the county's incinerator, there are close to $260 per ton of health and environmental damage that are not paid for through your taxes. These are paid for through health bills, through the consequences of climate change, and all sorts of other externalized costs that are borne by society. And you can see here that the climate impacts are about twice as bad from incineration versus going direct to a landfill. But the other emissions are make it so much greater. You have the heart attacks and strokes caused by particulate matter, the asthma attacks and respiratory distress caused by nitrogen oxides released mostly from the incinerator. This all includes transportation as well, but you'll see in a minute that's a small portion. The cancers, birth defects, learning disabilities, and other impacts of toxic chemical pollution in red. And then a few other criteria lumped together here because they're the small ones in the green bar at the top. And so all of this, when you add it all up, comes to much greater environmental harm than going direct to a landfill. Even though we don't like landfills, we know they're bad, we need to be real about the fact that one is definitely worse than the other. And there are similar results that have been found in other analyses, a more recent one done for the largest incinerator in the nation in Delaware County, Pennsylvania, one before that for Fairfax County, Virginia, and also one in the past couple of years for Hawaii. And we see similar results across these studies. In the Montgomery County analysis that we did for the Beyond Incineration report, this slide now is just looking at the carbon emissions, the CO2 and methane, so the carbon dioxide equivalents over 20 years, which is where methane shows itself to be much more potent. And you find that incineration in red is still much worse than the 10 landfills that we looked at the most, which are in yellow. The transportation portion, though, is very small relative to the waste facilities themselves. In the county currently, you have a rail-based system that gets the waste from the Shady Grove transfer station in Durwood up to Dickerson to the incinerator, and then the ash by rail all the way down to near Richmond, Virginia for a landfill. And those CO2 emissions add up to that little black bar at the top compared to the incinerator smokestack. But with the landfills and all the methane and carbon dioxide that comes off of them, those emissions are far less than incinerator. And even if you're traveling as far as 350 miles by truck in blue, or 615 by rail in black, and only a few of these landfills have rail access, and that's why you see just a few with double bars, those impacts don't even come close to catching up. And so this idea that a lot of politicians have that transportation and dirty diesel trucks are the problem, and that we wouldn't want to ship our waste all the way to a landfill hundreds of miles away if that's the case. Some are not that as far, but that somehow justifies burning close to home to avoid the transportation impacts. And charts like these, and we've seen similar ones in other studies, even of food systems, show similarly that transportation is really not the issue. And you would have to transport it clearly across the country or beyond to get to the point where you're even close to catching up to incineration. So that's really not a justification for using an incinerator. Go ahead, Lauren.
All right, thank you, Mike. So this is a letter just we wanted to highlight that the county has been working on this. We've been working with them, county executive, for years. Back when Tom Hucker was president of the county council, county executive wrote a letter to the council and said, as you can see, that their goal was to close the incinerator within the next 12 to 18 months. That was in 2021. And we are now well past that. And 2026 is coming up, and they're now wanting to extend it even further. So we just need to say enough is enough. So we're back to how you can help. And this was what I showed you in the beginning. I'll show it to you again. If you can include this issue in your messaging to membership, that would help us, because we need to be part of a larger coalition. It can't just be one group. It has to be a lot of groups that recognize that this is a problem. We'd love to have you ask us to speak to other groups that you're part of, and like to have you join our efforts to close the incinerator, become a volunteer. And especially, we would love to have members of TCM join us when we meet with county council members, which is coming up. We're scheduling meetings now. So I'm going to leave it at that.